Yisro has a very famous question, which is discussed extensively amongst the Rishonim, as to when exactly the placement of the Parsha, right? The famous question as to when exactly this happened. When did it happen that Yisro came and actually joined the Bnei Yisrael? When did he bring Tzipora, the rest of Moshe Rabbeinu's family? And there are essentially a number of different positions as to what transpired. I mean, Rashi takes the position that the second half of the parsha, that means to say the next bit, when he tells the advice about the shoftim, Rashi says that must have taken place later on, and Rashi proves that from the sequence of the psukim, and the fact that we don't find that he went and came back again when it says here, because it concludes that he sent him off to his land, which we know transpired later on, and Baalos must have been the same event that must have taken place later. But Ramban also learns like that the second half, that means to say the part when he gives the advice, took place later on, but this part took place at this stage. There are different, there are proofs both ways. You might ask, why would we need to say that the first part of the parsha, Vayishma Yisro, when he came, that would ostensibly that would seem to fit very well with the narrative. He hears everything that's gone on, and therefore he comes and he brings. Why would you say that whole part of the parsha, the whole of it, took place later on? So the Ibn Ezra holds like that. The Ibn Ezra holds the whole thing is out of order, and the whole thing took place later, right? And the Ibn Ezra brings a number of proofs for this. And he says. Let me just find the bit. He says that everything took place. Yisro only came in the second year after the Mishkan was established, and he proves it from the fact that it says, I will make Novodati as Chukei Elokim Masor. I mean, all the laws and the statutes. This was all later. This all must have been after Matan Torah, right? And he says, for example, he brings another proof from the fact that it says. It says that he, I think he proves it from the fact that it says Ashahu Chonesh Shom Haru Elokim, right? He says the midbar, that he was encamped there by the mountain of Hashem. Well, that hadn't happened. Right at the beginning it says Ashahu Chonesh Shom. So he marshals a number of different proofs for the fact that all of this, that in fact even this whole part, even the beginning part when Yisro comes, all takes place later. If so, of course, he has to deal with the question as to why, therefore, it is positioned here, which is the obvious question. And that I want to show you inside. If you've got it across, if not, don't worry. I'll read through it. It's beautiful, beautiful piece from the Ibn Ezra. So it's the first Ibn Ezra on the parsha. It's a very long piece, and there's a highlighted word in bold if you've got Chumash, which is the word va'ata. Yeah, can you see that? Where it's ata says two-thirds of the way through. Va'at. You don't know, have to, just in case if you and he says like this. He says va'ata, and now a farish loma nichnasa Parshas Yisro Mokum. Why was it that it was placed here? This parsha. Sorry, it's in the Ibn Ezra. It's the first Ibn Ezra on the parsha, but it's the second paragraph. It's about two-thirds of the way through. It begins with va'ata. He says, I'm going to explain to you now. Loma nichnasa Parshas Yisro Mokum. Why was Parshas Yisro in this place? Ba'avur shehizkel malo. Because it mentions just beforehand the evil that Amalek did to Klal Yisrael. So therefore, to counterbalance it, it mentions the good that Yisro did. Because of Yichad Yisrael Kol HaTova, that Yisro rejoices over everything positive that's happened to the Bnei Yisrael. And he gave them a good piece of advice. And Moshe says to him, you will be our eyes, you'll be there in that position of leadership, because he lifts up their eyes. And then he brings the psukim with Shol as well. And you find the and Shol refers to the fact that he did a kindness with the Bnei Yisrael, okay? And it mentions like this, because it mentions above that milchama, this war with Hashem, with Amalek, that they will be obligated to wage this war against Amalek. His kidva Yisro, it mentions Yisro in that context. They lived amongst Amalek. If you go through Sefer Shmuel, right, you learn that the descendants of Yisro ended up living amongst Amalek, the Canaanite, right? And when Shaul comes to destroy Amalek, he has to tell them. Says that until now. He tells them go away. He tells them you must. He tells them to go. To be careful. Make sure you leave and don't stay here because we're about to wage war against Amalek. They should Yisrael should remember the kindness of their father, their ancestor Yisro, and not touch his descendants. And the point here that I think the Ibn Ezra is saying, which I think it's a very beautiful idea, is the fact that it is a counterpoint to Amalek. According to Ibn Ezra, it's out of chronological order, and it is placed here specifically because they could leave the episode with Amalek thinking that everyone is out to get them. Everyone will look at their success in a negative light. You learn the whole story of Amalek. That's essentially what happens, right? Everything, they look at what they experienced, and everything's gone fantastically well for the Bnei Yisrael. Right, let's attack them, let's damage them, let's cause them hurt. Says the Ibn Ezra, the Torah specifically puts the Parsha of Yisro next to it because Yisro lives together with Amalek. He sees the same thing as Amalek and reacts in entirely the opposite way. By Yichad Yisro, he's happy for them. And maybe the message there, according to the Ibn Ezra, is that for our future as a nation, there will always be people who seek to do us harm and are jealous of what we have achieved as a people. And that's the Amalek, right? But we should never lose sight of the fact that even from within the very negativity, the very evil, there can be people that see things in the opposite way and react positively to us. Yisro lives amongst the Amalek, at least later on he certainly does. His descendants, once in Eretz Yisrael, they end up living together with Amalek, so they have this close relationship, right? But he is vayichat, he rejoices. The idea that you can have something positive even from a negative situation. Not everyone has to read it this way. And it is a very vital and beautiful message that the Ibn Ezra is bringing out here from the positioning of this parsha. Now, let's go on to the specifics. The specifics are the question surrounding what exactly it is that Yisro hears, right? And we find that different opinions are given in Chazal as to what it was that Yisro exactly hears. What was it that they exactly heard? And Rashi brings that Rashi in the Parsha, he heard Kriyas Yamsuf and Melchames Amalek, Kriyas Yamsuf and the fight and the war against Amalek. Now the Kliyokar here says, you go again to the first Kliyokar in the Parsha. The Kliyokar says that he brings three different opinions from the Medrash. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Melchames Amalek. He heard Melchames Amalek. Rabbi Elazar Medoi Omer Matan Torah Shamor Ba. He heard Matan Torah. That's following the line of the Ibn Ezra. So it's a machlokes. It goes back, you see, clearly to the Tanoim as well. He heard Matan Torah, and never he came, right? It's after Matan Torah, according to that view. Rabbi Elazar Omer Kriyas Yamsuf Shamor Ba. He heard Kriyas Yamsuf. And the Kliyokar says, clearly, there isn't really a disagreement here in the sense that Yisro heard everything, right? He heard all these things, right? If you heard about Kriyas Yamsuf, you'd also heard about Amalek, right? He heard about everything, right? So what exactly is the debate? What does it mean? What is the point here? And he says the main machlokas, the main point of disagreement here is which report that he heard caused him to bring Moshe Rabbeinu's family. That's the question, right? That really is the essence of what the debate is, right? And he brings out of here a very, very beautiful idea, and he says that that everything revolves around this particular question as to which exact episode was it that led him to bring the family to meet Moshe Rabbeinu at this juncture. And he says, if you first seeing inside, it's three. There's three relatively short paragraphs in that first section of Kliyokar where he splits up Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Eliezer. Right? You see that? Yes, the second paragraph in that first. It's the first Kliyokar on the Parsha, but it's the second paragraph. Yeah. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Melchames Amalek Shoma. He heard Melchames Amalek because Hashem said, I'm not going to read all of it, so paraphrase it. Hashem said there will be this battle against Amalek forever, midar dar. Now Yisro, as we just said, lives amongst the Amalekim, okay? And he's very worried. Because if there's going to be a constant battle, what's going to happen? I'm risking my life. My life is in danger. He's worried about his own life. Okay. So he worried. He said like this: if I don't bring back Moshe Rabbeinu's family to him, if I don't bring them back now, then when there is in future, and of course it can happen at any stage, another battle with Amalek, they're going to fight me as too. They're going to fight me too. And therefore, he brings Moshe Rabbeinu's family because he said they will now perform kindness with him, with himself, Yisro, right? Because he is Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law. He will create and cement the link between himself and the leader of the Bnei Yisrael, so that if there ever is for himself or his descendants, as there was, a future battle with Amalek, he will be protected in this way. That is the view of Rabbi Yeshua. That's what Rabbi Yeshua says. He heard Mechanes Amalek, and therefore he brought Moshe Rabbeinu's family. It was a self-protective measure to relink Moshe with his family so that he would be protected as Moshe Rabbeinu's father. Yeah, they're quite utilitarian for his own purposes. We'll come back and I think we can make something very nice out of this in terms of how all three link together. What is the second view? Rabbi Elazar Medoi says he heard Matan Torah. Again, Rabbi Elazar Medoi holds like the view that Yisro came after Matan Torah. Now, what is the reason that he came that caused him to bring the family? Because we know that Moshe Rabbeinu made the decision, that because the Bnei Yisrael were told, Al tikshu el isha, yes, do not come near to their wives who are associated around Matan Torah. They had to be betara at that time in purity. So Moshe Rabbeinu made a kal v'chomer that he should completely separate from his wife, right? Should never should never try and bring her back. Yisro wants to prevent this, and he brings to Moshe, the last two lines of that second paragraph, Al kain bo Yisro v'hevi l'Moshe es ishtoi. He brought his wife, Kadesha Tador Etzlo, so she should live with him. Ki tiferes Odom lo sheves Bayis. Based on a pasuk in Yeshayahu, it is the splendor of a person, lo sheves Bayis, to live a normal family life. So he brings Tzipora back because of Matan Torah, as if to say, no, you should not continue living forever separately. No, it's time you should make sure that you live as a normal husband and wife. Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, it says, like the law of Moshe Yisrael, right? That's the second view. Now the third one is Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says Kriyas Yamsuf. Now, what does Kriyas Yamsuf have to do with bringing Moshe Rabbeinu's family? Because Yisro thought, again, I'm just paraphrasing, Yisro thought that Moshe had divorced her. Shalcha beget Piturin. He thought he had divorced her. There seems to be references in the Medrash to this when he sent her away. And we know from the Gemara Sanhedrin and other places this idea that to bring people together in marriage, shidduchim is one of the hardest things. Kriyas Yamsuf, Kosh Lezavkum, Kriyas Yamsuf is the hardest thing, like Kriyas Yamsuf, okay? And it specifically refers, he says, the Gemara talks about this idea of zivug sheni. Some people, it's complicated area, this idea of having a second match. He says zivug sheni, it would seem, refers to machzig u'rishosoi. That's his view. Someone who returning to someone who gets divorced and wants to remarry the divorcee. Okay, stay with me. You'll see why we're going with this, right? And he says that this separation and remarriage is like Kriyas Yamsuf, because they were originally naturally joined, right? Naturally together as husband and wife. Then there was a split between them, right? Which was clearly quite a dramatic moment in their relationship, right? Because they were completely separated, divorced, yeah. And it's very difficult to be back together. But what you see from Kriyas Yamsuf is that Hashem can do anything, and Hashem can bring them back together. If Hashem wants the water to be brought back together after splitting, it can happen, and it will happen. So Yisro said, "Kamayim haponim laponim kein lei fa'odam la'odam." Very clever words of Mishlei, right? Like water relates to each other, so too people are like that too. They relate to each other as well. So he says, like this, the last section of this kliyaka. He saw that the natural relationship then was removed, was finished, because they got divorced. So he thought, they will never get back together again. It's impossible. It's hopeless. It's finished. The Kasha Shoma in Kriyas Yamsuf, when he heard Kriyas Yamsuf, where things that are so, these incredible things, Ka'asher, Pirudom, Shavu Le'isonam, they were separate, yet they came back together, the waters came back together as if they were never separate. He saw, he saw that it's now, it is possible. They can be reunited, and therefore he brings Tzipora back to be reunited with Moshe Rabbeinu. So this kliyakar, if you look at it if you look at it all in the round, what you see is that he interprets each opinion of the Tanoim as a different level in terms of his motivation, Yisro's motivation. The basic level is Rabbi Yeshua, which is self-protection. He brings Sipora back so he gets that association and link so that he's protected in the case there is a future battle with Amalek. That's basic level, right? The second high level is Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar Midoi says, no, it was in order to protect Sipora, that she should not be forever separate from him. Remember, because he said, because of Matan Torah, where Moshe Rabbeinu made this calculation, he should never be married. So you should be. You should live as a normal husband and wife. So he brings Sipora back. The third level and the highest level is Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says that, according to Rabbi Eliezer, the highest level of Yisro's motivation is to create a renewed Shalom Bayis where it didn't seem like it was possible to ever have a reconciliation between this couple. And he sees Kriyas Yamsuf, wow, that level of separation, yet they come back together. This couple too can be brought back together. And I just thought to myself when I was learning this kliyaka, I thought to myself, perhaps this links to this very beautiful Gemara in Brachas. There's a book called The River, the Kettle, and the Bird. Have you seen that book yet? It's a lovely book about Shalom Bayis and marriage and everything else. And the book is about that in general. But it brings the Gemara in Brachas, which says that if a person sees in a dream a river, a kettle, or a bird, yeah, one of those things in a dream. There's a whole long Gemara there in Brachas. Remember, the end of Brachas about dreams, yeah? Right? You see a river, a kettle, and a bird, that's a sign of peace. Hope for Shalom, for peace, right? So he, I think it was Rabbi Feldman who wrote the book, River, Kettle, and Bird, and he crafts out of that a very beautiful, he named the book after it, a very beautiful idea that each of them represent, a different madrega in marriage. So you can have a couple, a relationship, which is like a river, where they're both sort of flowing in the same direction, right? That's the basic level. They both got their aim is going in a particular direction, which is maybe positive. They work together. It's utilitarian, if you like, in that way, right? The second level is the level of the kettle. What is the kettle? The kettle is where you have two ingredients, right, that work together, the water and the heat, that work together to actually produce a third element, the steam, right, the boiling water, right, which is something positive, something remarkable, something that you can that wasn't there before, right? And the highest level is the level of the bird. What is the level of the bird? The level of the bird is complete unity, joining together in complete unity, joining together in the sense that they're actually one being together, right? So it just occurred to me that maybe that's also the three levels in this medrash. That's really what's reflected here in the views of Rabbi Shiur and Rabbi Eliezer and of Loz and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Shiur is the utilitarian level, is like the river. Yisro wants to protect himself, so he has to bring Sipora back to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's all a utilitarian thing. There's no like real interest there in creating any sort of real shalom there in that way. When it comes to Rabbi Elazar, it is to protect Sipora in the sense that there is an idea that no, they should build a home together, right? That they should be. There's value in them being married. He uses those words in Rabbi Elazar. Ki tiferes odom lasheves bayis. It's a splendor of a person to live as a couple. You shouldn't be living, you should live together. Your marriage should live together. And finally, Rabbi Eliezer wants to create something much better than that. Something which is genuine and ultimate unity. That even those who thought they never could have that unity together, they had already got divorced. They brought them back together. So that's, I think that's my little chiddush in the kliyaka. I think it works. I think it works nicely. Now the Balaturim. Perek Yud Ches Pasuk Gimel. The Baal HaTurim brings a medrash, which is we are still towards the beginning of the Parsha. We're not making much progress, but Pasuk Gimel ve'es shnei voneha asher shem ha'echad Gershom, ki omar ger yisi b'eretz nochriya. Now the Baal HaTurim brings a medrash, which is very difficult medrash and surprising to understand because what he points out, and he's pointing out here, there's a whole discussion here why his two sons are named here. I think this is the first time we even have a reference to Eliezer's name. It's only here, right? Why is that specifically here? Okay, fine. But he says that Here the first time it says ki omar, for he said. The second time it doesn't say that. Why does it say ki omar, for he said about Gershom, I was a stranger be'eretz nochriya, like a stranger in a strange land? Why did he say that? So the Baal HaTurim says that there's a medrash which says, very famous medrash, Keshenosan Yisro bito leMoshe, when Yisro gave his daughter to Moshe, hutzrach lahasnos, he had to make a condition, sheyia ben orishon la'avodah zarah, that the first son should be for idolatry. And therefore he didn't actually even perform bris milah on him until he was at the inn, and then and his life was threatened, because he thought that son would be for avodah zarah. There is a machlokus whether that son was Gershom or Eliezer. He's learning that it was Gershom. There's a debate as to which son it was. The whole episode with the bris milah. Anyway, Tzipora gave him bris milah, and she kind of forgave that condition that he had made with her father in that respect. Okay, and it says therefore ki omar, for he said. It was revealed to everyone at that moment that he was forced to make this condition. It wasn't something he wanted to do, but at the end of the day, that's was something which he needed to do, and he made that condition for Yisro. And the question here is obvious, and the question is, how could Yisro's given up on avodah zarah, right? Yisro's given up on avodah zarah, and how could Moshe Rabbeinu agree to make such a condition that the first son will be for avodah zarah, right? And the Kerem HaTzvi has a very beautiful pshat here. The Kerem HaTzvi says that Yisro, we know, had reached a belief in Hashem. This is very famous, through going through everything, right? That's what he did. He went through an analysis of everything carefully, all the cultures and everything else, and he reached a conclusion himself that Hashem was true, and that's what he wanted to do. Now, he reached that clarity, and he wanted his own grandson, his eldest grandson, to follow his derech, to follow that pathway, to specifically learn all of those false ideologies, to work through it himself, to reject them all, and end up choosing the right path. And he felt that was a better path than blind faith, right? Just going with the path of emunah. Just going there. You should come to your own, come to it through yourself. Don't rely on what others have told you beforehand. But Moshe Rabbeinu had a different view. He knew that although it's possible, there are some people who might be able to go down that pathway and be successful. It's a very, very high risk strategy. To throw someone into all of that negativity and all of those negative influences and hope on a wing and a prayer that they're going to make it through is a very dangerous thing to do. And therefore he opposes it. He doesn't want to do that. But what can he do? While he's in Midian, he can't impose his will on his father-in-law. His father-in-law is running the show, right? And that's the derech that he wants. That's the pathway that he wants, Yisro wants for his own grandson. And that is something, and that is what it really means. Says the Kerem HaTzvi, the real debate here wasn't about whether he would, he wants him to be committed to worship idols. No, it's about risk-taking in chinuch. That was the debate. Yisro wants to be his grandchild, to be exposed to everything, all the influences, the negative influences, make the decision himself. Take all those risks, the high-risk strategy in chinuch. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't want that. Doesn't want it, because the risk and the fact that the risk of going the wrong way as a result and being exposed to anything and everything is not worth it. It can work, but it's too dangerous and it's unnecessary. It needs to be carefully thought through in advance. That was really what was going on. The Gershom represents the risk involved in taking that risky strategy. That's what really that medrash means. And we know, as famously Chazal say, that ultimately Gershom had a descendant, who did, in fact, it seems, go the wrong pathway. You can look that up in Shoftim, Perek Yud Ches, where it talks about Yehonosim ben Gershom ben Menashe. It's slipped in, it is Menashe, but it really refers to Moshe Rabbeinu. And he was the Komer, considered like a priest for Avodah Zarah, a good descendant of Moshe Rabbeinu. So it had that negative effect. But what we see from this Baal HaTurim is the idea that sometimes we can be in a situation where there's a need to exercise caution. that the enthusiasm to just go ahead straight away is not necessarily right. Yisro's approach of the high-risk strategy of risk-taking when it comes to chinuch was a dangerous strategy. It was one that Moshe Rabbeinu did not want to be part of. I think that this is reflected later on in the parsha as well. There's an Orach Chaim. If you look at Perek Yotes,
It also not make sense. Living 60 years, traveling all different places to find out what you want to know.
Yeah, absolutely. It might work for 1 in a million, but most people, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely risky. Yes. So if you look at the Orach Chaim, Perek Yotes Pasuk Chof Aleph, right? Vayomer Hashem el Moshe rei to'ed ba'om pen yehersu el Hashem lirois v'nofal mimenu rov. Yeah, there's a very strong emphasis here on not coming near the mountain. It's a bit of a surprising element in the whole thing, right? There will be a chiyuv misa if they come close, right? The death penalty, right? Vayomer Hashem el Moshe rei to'ed pen yehersu el Hashem lirois v'nofal mimenu rov. What is it? Emphasize again and again. Moshe says to Hashem, they're not going to come near. Don't worry, they're not going to come near because you've warned them. Surround the mountain. You know, what is this emphasis when it comes to the giving of the Torah on not getting near, not getting close to the mountain? And there's a piece of Orach Chaim here. It's the second paragraph on Pasuk Chof Aleph. The Orach Chaim says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes on Har Sinai, what does he do? There is the ultimate light. The light of Hashem fills everything. When they approach the mountain, if they would come too close to the mountain, Hashem would need to, so to speak, it's almost like the Kabbalah idea of tzimtzum. He would need to, so to speak, restrict himself in some way, because they couldn't see him, they couldn't gaze him. We can't really understand what these words mean, but to come too close would be too close to the revelation. And that's what it means, that they would come too close, pen yehersu el Hashem, unless they damage something by coming close to Hashem, they would in some way limit Kaviyachal, the light that Hashem would be able to display on Har Sinai in that way. We can't really say these words, but that's what he's trying to express. And the point is, they won't be able to see if they come too close. If they come too close to, and they try and see too much, they will end up limiting. They will end up thinking they can see more, but actually limiting what they can see, because the light itself will need to be held back because they've got too close. They won't be able to experience the revelation in full. They will think themselves that they can see when in reality they can't. The next thing he says, okay, you don't get a benefit, but there's no damage. What's the problem? Let them get close. What's the big deal? Oh, they'll get the extra benefit of that extra light, because of the fact that Hashem won't want them to see, so to speak, be that close to the revelation. They won't be damaged. That's why it says no, v'nofal mimenu rav pirush milvad shlo yiru od lahem akrovas nezek. They'll be damaged too. And he says v'diktek loima rav. V'diktek loima rav. It specifically talks about rav pirush afilu ya rav shebohem. Even if it's a great leader, a rav amongst them, lo yoma shle akbet elo al hamoin ha'am. He shouldn't say, oh, only the regular people need to be careful about this. They're fitting for the divine presence to rest upon them. They don't have to worry. That's why it says, even a rav might fall. Even a rav might go the wrong way as a result of trying to come too close. The Orach Chaim understands, if we understand what he's trying to say, that the warning of coming close to Har Sinai is teaching a message of the benefit in life of caution. Sometimes rushing forward and saying, I want to experience everything. I want to, and through that I will learn more. Through that I will gain my access, like this idea of the Kerem Atzvi. Because we will expose ourselves to everything there is to be exposed to, therefore, ultimately, in the long run, we'll gain more. We will, exactly, it's the same idea. That's why I think it's exactly the same idea. Actually, sometimes not experiencing that caution can lead to losing more. however great a person is or thinks they are, and however reliant they are upon their own ability to sort of like, yes, I can moderate things myself, I can decide for myself. No, the Kodesh Baruch Hu says on Har Sinai, understand that you need to exercise caution. Sometimes to achieve spirituality in life, it's as much about what you decide not to do as what you decide to do. That's the point, and that's the message. It was just as important for them not to come too close to Har Sinai as it was for them to come close. They had to come close, and yet they still had to hold back as well. So I think what we see from here, looking at all the ideas together, is the idea that, and we began with the idea of the Ibn Ezra, the idea that Yisro is specifically mentioned here. If you learn that the whole thing is out of order, to counterbalance the fact there will be people who seek to harm us, but even amongst them, there will be those who don't. We shouldn't look at every experience in life as a people, as if everyone's out to get us. We talked about the idea of Shalom Bayis, how that needs investment, the idea of the three levels, Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Elazar. Moshe Rabbeinu's union with Tzipporah. Remember, this is the first example, explicit example in the Torah. We have Midrashim about Amram and Yocheved, but that's a Medrash. But the first explicit example in the Torah of a family that's been separated in this way, I think it's the first one, and they brought back together, right, as a family. Yes, I think so. And therefore, it's important to take the lessons of how it's possible to still come back together. And in terms of chinuch as well, the idea of chinuch is something which needs tremendous caution. There is a debate going on between Yisro and Moshe Rabbeinu as to whether it's worth taking risks. Everyone has to take risks, right? There's always a level of risk, especially in chinuch, right? But sometimes one has to be able to say, actually, on balance, caution is essential. Hold back. The risk-taking is not always the right strategy in life, and especially when one wants to sometimes achieve spirituality, ruchnias, sometimes you need to hold back to achieve that. Okay. Have a very good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Sometimes less is more.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure.
Moshe actually divorced.